Hello, I am Radagast at your service with Mystic View. Number 3. I guess I'm going to kind of give an overview of a mystic's view of what's going on in the world. And the real battle against, at one level, it won't call it good and evil, but it's really, there are these two different forces, and one is very pro-life, which of course pro-life is pro-liberty, pro-freedom, respect for the planet. And then there's another force that is really quite anti-life and anti-freedom, anti-liberty, anti-rights, doesn't like the planet, does everything it can to poison it. And so those are the two forces. And unfortunately, as somebody born in the United States of America, it seems like at least the muscle of the bad guys is the United States of America. And when you follow what passes for diplomacy from the various countries around the world, the bellicose, kind of spoiled childlike behavior that comes out of our State Department, Samantha Power at the UN. Oh my God. Definitely one of the Furies. The Greeks had these three kind of demi-goddesses known as the Furies. And Samantha definitely qualifies as one of those Furies. Susan Rice would probably qualify as another. And so you kind of have that. Then you have the whole NATO thing going on, the North Atlantic Terrorist Organization. Let me say that clearer. The North Atlantic Terrorist Organization. And and the coming and the real sense of being at the end times a little bit, because we are having an apocalypse happening, and an apocalypse is an unveiling. And what is being unveiled, largely through the Russian Federation, is how complicit the Western countries are in terrorism, and especially the probably most organized terrorist organization, which is either ISIS, ISIL, Islamic State, or Daesh, as they're also called. And it seems you'll see Iranian and Russian businessmen be sanctioned, but nobody seems to look into the finances of this terrorist organization and put any sanctions on what's going on there. And it's really becoming clear, even by the behavior, accidental equipment and food drops that happen to end up in the hands of the Islamic State. The kind of feral form of Islam that comes out of Saudi Arabia in the form of Wahhabism, which is quite different than true Islam. And true Islam will include both Sunni and Shia. But when I say true Islam, I mean the Sunni and Shia, they have their doctrinal issues. But the majority of them are true Muslims. The Wahhabists are their own sect, and they're quite medieval. And they're warlike. They're anti-life. They are kind of, when you take God out of Islam, you end up with Wahhabism, and lines in the book that have no spirit to interpret them, except a mean, murderous spirit, using words, and in many ways corruptions of the original text to justify their anti-life movement. And one of the great crimes that's happening, especially in Syria, Syria is the home of the oldest Christian population on the planet because that's where all the action took place in that area. Now, unfortunately, for this group of Christians, they do not belong to the Roman Catholic religion. And the Roman Catholic religion is the one that stands with the New World Order. And so the obliteration of this group of Christians is actually seen as cleaning up Christianity in many ways by certain parties. And even much of the schism that you see with the Russian Federation and why it seems never to be able to properly integrate into Europe, why it always is kind of kept apart. And that really is the schism of the fact that they are, as a nation, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, where the rest of Europe is some form of Roman Catholic. I mean, all of the Protestant Reformation were all breaks with the Roman Catholic Church, not the Eastern Church. And so whether or not you have a very Roman Catholic, the traditional Roman Catholic countries or Protestant countries, they're still affiliated with Rome, and that makes them against the East. And that's a divide that is not really seen, and it's a huge divide. And it's a driving force in the war of civilizations. And interestingly enough, the Eastern Orthodox do not have an issue with Islam. Islam and Eastern Orthodox have gotten along pretty well since they have had to live together. It is the Roman Catholic Church that has been militaristic and antagonistic to other faiths, and that would be the Eastern Christians, and that would also be the Muslim faith. And so what you see in these alignments has a deeper spiritual base, which is why here at the Mystic View, I'm bringing this point out, because the political aspects of this really line up with the spiritual aspects of it. And that really can't be overlooked, and it's not there, and it's generally not something anybody really wants to look at. I mean, when you see like fellow Slavs of the Russians, the fellow Slavs would be the Poles are Slavs, but they're a Roman Catholic country, and anybody who reads, and they're part of NATO, which is part of the reason they're part of NATO is because they're Roman Catholic, and that sets them up antagonistically against their fellow Slavs in the Russian Federation who are Eastern Orthodox. And anybody who kind of follows, I mean, I know some Polish people, and they have this Russophobia. They have this fear of like Russia as the boogeyman that persists past the Soviet times. Anybody can understand that going back to pre-91, why certain countries might have a bad opinion of the then Soviet Union. But the current Russian Federation is not the Soviet Union, and it is a completely different entity. It has a spiritual core. The Soviet Union didn't. The Soviet Union was officially an atheist country. And but when 20 years later, after the Berlin Wall fell, and we have a spiritual Russian Federation, you will still see Polish people in utter terror of being invaded by Russia. And I mean, part of that is fomented by the politics, but what's behind the politics is the schism. One group of Slavs are Roman Catholic, and the other group of Slavs are Eastern Orthodox, and that's really what drives the wedge between people who would ordinarily be united. And that's the sad truth. But anyway, so these forces are starting to form into some form of battle. When President Putin and the Russian Federation decided to assist their ally Syria with their terrorist problem, which was being massively funded by Western nations and very obviously funded by nations like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and now fairly obviously by Turkey. And then you see the support of Turkey by nations like the United States and much of Europe, all not all of it. You start seeing the sides. You start seeing the games that are being played, and there are a lot of people I know who still think that it's all just kind of a game, and Russian and Vladimir Putin is just another one of the big boys, playing the game. Now, that is, I feel, a misperception. His heart is in a completely different place. He is playing realpolitik, and even just at the top levels of government, there's always some benefit to getting along as well as one can. Open warfare is no good, and the so what looks like Putin's playing both sides is he's just trying to keep World War III from happening, but at the same time drawing a line in the sand in certain places and saying enough is enough. And one of these places was Syria. And you still have the United States and much of Europe saying Assad must go. It's none of their business. It's not their country. They have no right saying what must happen. They are certainly entitled to their opinions of what they think and what would be best, but this whole Assad must go is crazy. I mean, there was an election of what's left of Syria, I know, a year or so ago, and Assad won handily. And he's also come up. He's had his moments where he wasn't so wise, and I believe he's become a wiser person, and his people see that. And so there is just complete craziness coming out of the Western side, the NATO and America, with what's going on with Syria, butting their noses in. And the Russian Federation was invited in by Syria. They had their allies, and any sovereign country is allowed to invite other people in if they want. It's their country. I mean, it's like an organism. It's like having your own house. You can invite who you want in your house. Uninvited guests are trespassers. So any Western boots on the ground in Syria is illegal. It's unlawful. It's unlawful at the most common law level. This is my country. These are my borders. Who's ever inside is by my invitation. Whoever's not by my invitation doesn't belong there. I mean, common basic law looks at this as an invasion. I mean, like I said, we're like organisms. For one organism to be inside of another organism against its will is madness, and it's war. It's really a declaration of war. And so basically what we have going on in Syria with these foreign boots on the ground is undeclared war. And so that's going to get hairy because they have no legitimacy there. Syria and their friends, the Russians, have every military right to do whatever they want to these people who are legally there. But there's realpolitik. And the thing is, okay, they're doing something illegal, but they have a really massive army. They're really out of their minds. And do we do what's legal, or do we do what's kind of right for the world? And fortunately, currently the Russian Federation is doing its best job to have a level head. There's been bombing of Syrian infrastructure. There were some towers taken out by the coalition. Who knows who was flying the jets? But again, it was nothing happens with this group that the other doesn't know about. So whether it's France or Turkey or United States, they're all in on it. It's nobody's operating in secret. And that shoot down of the Russian airplane by Turkey was obviously not something that happened in a vacuum. Clearly some kind of experiment. Let's test the will of the Russian Federation. And so from the mystic view of this all is the battle has begun. It's just how fierce and ferocious it will be. popular opinion at home in any of these countries matters. And one of the problems is the little bit that I can stomach of Western media, and let me tell you, I can take it hardly for a second. It is such an insult to my decency, never mind my intelligence. It's twisted words. It's an inverted worldview. It's a form, the exceptional nation with its entitlements. Um, it's crazy, and the United States playing policeman of the world. I mean, I think as we're now getting more and more awake, not only do we need a policeman of the world, we might not even need policemen. So, taking it onto the world stage, it's really getting out of hand, and all I can say is hopefully more people will at least speak out. I don't care if it's making a phone call, sending an email, um, gathering in your town square and just saying enough is enough. But again, the mainstream Western media is doing enough of a job of selling its story that the average person walks around thinking Russia is a threat to us, Assad must go, and the United States is an exceptional country, and that anything it says obviously must be good and true. So, but I do see the good or the life affirming forces winning this, because it's a battle for the minds about ultimately, and the decorum that the Russian Federation and those, even Iran, are showing in the world in a respect for boundaries and respect for sovereign nations and respect for international law. There's, you don't have to agree with how they run their countries, but how they conduct themselves on the world stage is one of diplomacy. And then you have the diplomacy of the West, which is muscle and thug and hysteria. So hopefully, more and more people will see it really become obvious, because the other side is really losing it. The Western alliance is like rabid dogs, and I think that's becoming harder and harder for them to hide, and that creates critical awareness of just where people see things for what they are, and I hope that you people can see things for what they are. The whole anti-Islam thing is based on creating boogeymen. I mean, that's the other thing. ISIS with those ski masks. I mean, to me, they're like comic book characters, and then they have their black shirts and their tan boots and their Toyota trucks. I mean, this is branding. This is like something out of Hollywood. It's like something out of Hollywood. And then, of course, we find out that certain, if not all, of the beheading tapes were done in a studio. I mean, the whole ISIS thing. I mean, these are really dangerous, murderous people, and they're being funded and paid to be dirty, murderous people, and they're also paid. Some of the common people that they get, the kind of the ne'er-do-wells and people who don't have much of a life, largely because the West has bombed the crap out of their home. They're in there, but at the director level, you just have directors, you have managers, and they are doing their best to make Islam this dirty, disgusting religion when it's anything but. And again, and another thing, while they push that, nobody really speaks of the endearment for both Mary and Jesus that is found in the Quran. Now, some people have a problem because, like a lot of traditions other than the Roman Catholic tradition, many of the Gnostic traditions say that Jesus didn't die on the cross, and that's part of what's in the Quran. So that freaks a lot of people out. but they have, but they put Jesus on the same level as Muhammad, as a prophet. His mother is revered highly, and so there's nothing but good words about for in the Quran for Jesus and Mary. And meanwhile, the Christian world is made to think that Islam is not a friendly religion, and meanwhile, it's a very compatible religion with Christianity. And that's the real Islam, not this Hollywood boogeyman and Wahhabist form of it that is getting all kinds of funding and showing up all over the world. I mean, and that's those ski masks. I mean, again, that's branding. Any place you see that kind of thumb head stick up, it's like, ooh, the boogeyman is here. And I'm not, I don't want to minimize the mayhem and murder they bring, but they are a funded boogeyman with a look. You can have any kind of scruffy looking guy, that from the hills, some mountain guy who's fighting for the Taliban or something. But when you see that thumb head of those hoods, then you know that the West has brought their brand in, and their mischief and their murder and their mayhem. But I mean, it's really they have created a boogeyman, and the boogeyman wears a face mask. It's like so out of Hollywood. So I think that'll conclude this mystic view. And thank you for joining me. I hope it's been somewhat of an enlightening or interesting discussion. God bless you. See you next time.